Forgive me, Emperor, for I have sinned. It's been some time since my last confession. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to another build video. This one is going to be, hopefully, fairly brief actually. We are doing the Primaris Techmarine today. This chap here. So, as always, I'm going to build the model from the book, but I'm also going to give you some little hints and tips, pointers, my ideas about how you can't tweak the kit, change it up a bit. We do have some options on this kit. In particular, this seems to revolve around the left arm, one of which is holding a grav pistol, the other one is an open hand. The servo arm on the back appears to have two separate pieces as well, one to sort of mimic the action of the open hand. This picture here, as you can see, the servo arm piece is mimicking the movement of the Techmarine's normal arm. The other one is this option, where the servo arm seems to sit a bit lower and the pistol is in his hand. There is another piece there. The holster here comes, there's two options for that. One doesn't have the gun handle poking at the top, one does. That's a nice little touch. And the Techmarine has two head options as well. The first is the one that you can see sort of best on this picture here, with sort of half skull, half cyber, or sort of bionic replacement. The other one is the one that I'm going to be using today. That's the full helmet. I do tend to go with full helmets where I can, but as always with Marines, the head option is pretty universal. Fit. That's this piece here. If we can just focus on that, you can see, I mean, that will sit in pretty much any Space Marine neck piece in the Mark 10 Tacticus armour. So what I'm actually going to be doing on one of my other videos is using the Techmarine's head for a different purpose. However, I digress. We're going to use my own personal preference, Isha's Tears, Citadel plastic glue, other variants of glue are available. I'm going to look at trying some of those on the channel in due course. I'm also going to show you how I base my models today, and for that I will be using this Loctite 60 seconds all-purpose glue. It's a gel, comes in much bigger tubs, or tubes, sorry, than your standard super glue. This is 20 grams, normal super glue is sort of 3 grams, potentially 5 grams. But what I find is that gives me a nice adhesion on the base for any basing materials, and it dries a lot quicker than PVA, albeit it is much more expensive. But I'm impatient, so that's how I like to do things. Right, so let's get started on building the kit. First step in the book is to put the two halves of the body together. I'll dry fit these first, just to check and make sure that I know what we're doing. Yeah, I clipped and cleaned all of these off the frame last night, so everything is ready to go. Try not to knock the camera on the floor. So, as ever, when I'm doing one of these videos, I'll try and point out any steps that I think are perhaps best done in a slightly different order to the instruction booklet, although the Techmarine is a pretty straightforward model from that point of view. I don't think there's a huge amount to do if you wanted to customise it and sort of do it in a different way. Okay, step one done. You'll notice I have now managed to acquire myself some of the cool kid nitrile black gloves, which I was very excited about when those came through the letterbox the other day. least I don't have to wear the silly blue ones or get paint all over my fingers when I'm now airbrushing. Must admit, when I got an airbrush, I didn't quite realise how much extra gubbins and stuff I was going to have to get to go with it in terms of kitting myself out. However, it has been worth it. It took me a while to sort of get used to working with the airbrush, but certainly in the last month or so I've started to get a bit more familiar with it, and I'm enjoying using it much more now. Starting to get a bit sort of a bit more reliable in terms of the finish that I'm getting from it. So there we go. Both the legs aren't, as I've said, I mean, I'm expecting this to be a pretty quick build, all things considered. I did find it interesting when I was looking at this kit that this guy is basically wearing Tacticus armour, just the standard Mark 10 plate that your average Space Marine wears this edition, or your average Primaris Space Marine anyway. One thing I have picked up on is actually, if you took off this symbol here, this guy could quite easily be some kind of librarian to build up a psychic hood type thing out here. This is a power line bit serving that. Might make quite a nice little variant for a librarian, as there's only the one standard sort of Mark 10 armour sculpt. It's just an option that sort of occurred to me. So the instructions have us putting this arm on next, just like that, as was fairly standard with the sort of the modern Primaris kits. The pieces are sort of designed to go on in one very specific pose. Personally, I think I'd prefer to see the arm at that sort of an angle, just giving him a bit more menace to his walk. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to clip that piece off there, and we'll make that change now. So bear with me just while I get my clippers. Right, here we go. So GW standard issue clippers. As with ever with things like this, so just make sure that the blades are sitting as flat as possible. And just take off that piece there. My non-GW standard issue knife, just to trim that back, because what we don't want is any of that causing the arm to not sit flat. So we will just trim this back a little bit. There we go. Nice. That looks nice and flat now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the glue on here because I can see where I've taken the peg off. So where the arm will need to sit going forwards. And then we will just put it on with just that little bit more movement in the model. I think that gives him a lot more sort of a lot more menace as he's sort of moving forward, rather than seemingly needing to use his axe as a walking stick. Hopefully that won't interfere too much with his backpack later on when we get round to that, but if it does, we can just adjust it. So look at it now. No, so there's plenty of room there for that to be in place. So first little slight minor conversion there, and I think that looks a lot better. I'm planning on using the the grav pistol arm on the other arm. So having his right arm sort of slightly behind him as he points ahead of him with the grav pistol arm seems to make a bit more sense to me. There we go. Just sort of fully clear that arm out of the way while he aims with the other. So next is the shoulder pad to go on there. Now it's his right shoulder, so we have the shoulder pad with the Cog Mechanicus symbol on it. The reason being, all Space Marines have their chapter symbol on their left shoulder pad. So the Cog Mechanicus dedication to the machine god of Mars has to go on the right shoulder. I'm thinking I might just possibly do a painting video when I come around to doing this guy as well. So you'll see how I go about putting together the chapter symbol that I do on the Swords of Dawn. So the next step in the build is the backpack. Now what I'm going to do, I am going to leave the backpack off as a sub-assembly, but at each stage as I build it, I'm going to make sure I check it back to how it looks with the whole model completed. I'm going to leave it as a sub-assembly to make these pipes easier to paint when I come around to doing it. However, it's important to make sure as you go along that it does match up with the model and it achieves the look that you're going for. So the backpack goes on, and then we have a little pair of pouches to go on his rear armour here, just in there. At least they go just in there if I don't drop them. Now again, as with all the marine stuff, so the kits are very precisely manufactured these days, and so if I can stop dropping this piece, you'll be able to see that it's actually got the layering of those armour panels moulded onto the inside, so there really is no excuse for getting this in the wrong place, he says, as he probably then proceeds to go and put it in the wrong place. Let's hope not, shall we? So a bit of glue. I'm going to actually see if I can use my tweezers on this one, because this is a bit of a delicate operation. There we go. I can just feel it slot into place when it catches the right part of the armour. There we go. Never a bad thing to have a decent pair of tweezers. If nothing else, they're really handy for when you come to applying transfers onto a model. I've got several pairs kicking around. Most of them have got nasty, horrible, claggy bits of paint in the end, for various reasons, but you can quite easily trim those off with a hobby knife. Okay, so the next section of the build then is this little servo macadendrite, which goes into the backpack. So what I'm going to need to do is hold that backpack in place just while I figure out what angle I want the dendrite to go on. It attaches just there. And this is where potentially there's going to be some conflict with the axe arm. If it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be here. But I think we're okay. So, a handy skewer again. That is the bit onto which the mechadendrite attaches. And as you can see, there's the female part of the attachment just here. So we'll make the old gods cry again, just to keep this piece together. Just a tiny little dab there. Really don't need very much for something like this. And if you put too much on, what it can also do is obscure the shape of the part that you're using to attach it, which actually makes it more difficult to attach. There you go, you see, we just managed to get enough separation there between that mechadendrite and the axe. We'll pop him down there, because the next step is his forge bolter, which comes on here. The forge bolter comes in two parts. And is again a pretty simple construction. Bit of glue in there. Push the other part on. And we have all the funky little bits, and you can see just at the bottom there, there's the hole that plugs on top of the backpack. Just like that. There we go. And just to make sure, let's pop it back on again. Yep, I'm happy. So, next step of the build then is to put the base together. I actually took the liberty of doing that yesterday, just to make sure that this is all nice and stuck down, so that when I do the base later on, it's not going to shift around at all. And according to my instructions, gluing this on is the next part. So that is, according to the instructions, how he stands on the base. So when you do glue this base down, what I would recommend is you make sure that you do it like this, with this edge almost flush with the edge of your base, just to make sure that you've got plenty of room at the front here for his front foot to go, and for anything else extra that you're going to add to the Mini. One thing that I do strongly recommend when you're basing miniatures is to base them, if at all possible, towards the back of the base, because if you're going to put anything on the base to sort of show off, make it a bit more interesting than just your sort of basic sand or gravel or texture paint, you want it at the front, because that way you see it in the same sort of part, or the same view as the rest of the miniature. Sure, it can be kind of fun to hide little bits and bobs here and there around the back, but that tends to work on larger bases rather than smaller ones. So if you're going to add debris or anything to your model, you want to put it around this front section. So if at all possible, stand your model at the back. That being said, I'm just going to pop some glue on here. So I'm going to glue his front foot, because that's attaching to the base, and then I'm going to put the other glue in the recess there for his back foot. The reason I've done that is because I don't know exactly, or at that point I couldn't say exactly where his foot was going to stand on the base, and so it's easier to put the glue on his foot than it is to put it on the base itself. Now that's a nice part of here. You can just see in here the layered sections of his armour, or the base has been designed to fit snugly with those layered sections of his armour, so there's no interruption there. But it does mean that that piece of whatever it is he's standing on fits really nicely and smoothly in with the model, rather than him having one foot totally on it and one foot totally off. You can see it really sort of brings that piece in to be part of the model itself. So I'll pop that down for now. And the next thing to decide is which arm you're going to use. Now, as I said, I think I'm looking at using the grav pistol arm. So I need the empty holster. So as we can see here, that's this one. It's part number 22. And that will just attach onto the front section of his armour here, by the looks of it. Just there. So again, that's slotted in quite nicely. The recess on that holster actually fits over that additional armour layer plate on his hip. So a little dab of glue in there. And then just slot that nicely over there. Okay. That's that. And then we need to look at his arms. Out. So once again, I'm going to just hold the backpack in place so that I can make sure the whole thing matches up nicely, because the pipes attached to his arm and the gun here join up with these pipes on his backpack. So I just want to make sure I know roughly what sort of angle it needs to be at. There's going to be a little bit of play to be had if it's not perfect, but it's more just a visual cue when I'm sort of putting the arm in place to make sure that I'm doing it right. I mean, again, we've got the peg and the hole to make sure you know, the model is designed to go together this way, so it shouldn't be a problem, and it does fit snugly like that. You can feel when it's in the wrong place. It sort of wants to sit properly in the recess. So now that that's in place, I'm going to pop his head in. Particularly important, I think, with miniatures like this, when you've got an arm that's aiming a weapon, I find it really worthwhile making sure that that miniature looks like he's actually aiming where his gun is pointing. So you can see as you sort of line the arm up straight, the head is dead on to that. Now you could potentially tilt it a little bit. I think I'm happy with that as it is. And again, that's something else that just sort of helps ground the miniature in reality, just as a comparison. Nonchalant as that might look, I don't think it looks anything like as good as when he is literally staring down the barrel of the gun at you. Very pleased with that. So, the final part of this model is the full-on servo arm and the shoulder pad to go on that gun arm. Now the servo arm, again, has a nice little recess in there which attaches to this peg here, so we should be nice and simple. So again, if you watch, just the tiniest little drop of glue in there. I'm genuinely not actually squeezing this tube to get the glue out, literally just holding it upside down and letting the glue flow out is enough. Plastic glue does create a very strong bond, and now that the models have got all of these sort of pegs and holes that they sit in, there really isn't a need for a huge amount of glue on a piece like this. It will create that nice strong bond, and it will hold plenty strong enough for all the purposes that you might want of it, unless you're doing something weird and slashy with it. So there are two of these pieces in the kit for the slightly different angles that you might want to mount the servo arm at. I had a look at these last night and I chose this one, and it's going to sit at that angle. This isn't, I don't think, the piece that they actually recommend for this arm. However, what I wanted was the servo arm to sort of be going over his shoulder rather than under it. And so I chose this piece because it gives me the option to mount the servo arm in a slightly different position. Yeah, this is the mounting point for the open hand version. But what, as I say, what that lets me do is mount the servo arm in that sort of slightly different stance. Than the original kit was intended to do. I'm going to have it sort of slightly folded away like that. I mean, what you could potentially do if you really want to sort of start messing about with the kit is take this piece off here, and at that point you really can just rotate that round to any sort of angle that you want, and have that servo arm doing all sorts of funky things. I'm not quite at that stage with this kit, I don't think. I'm happy enough with the sort of the broad posing that it comes with. Potentially, if I look at doing any more Techmarines, which I might in the future, then I might look at sort of tweaking the arms, because certainly they give a lot of the definition as to what the kit is and what it's doing. But I think for what I'm going for with this one, sort of, this is my first one, I'm happy with that. Sort of the arm is up, and then sort of folds away underneath. It's almost as if it's sort of sat waiting to be used, which makes sense when he's aiming a gun. You know, hopefully whoever he's shooting at isn't that close. So we'll just pop the shoulder pad on. And then there's only a couple more things to do, and this one will be done in record time. Although you'd hope this one would be slightly quicker than the Gladiator or the Storm Speeders. It's fairly safe to say they are both considerably more complicated kits. And again, having popped that in place, let's just check this to make sure this isn't interfering with anything. We've got a little bit of contact there, which tells me that that shoulder pad isn't quite in the right position. So there we go, we'll sit it slightly further forward. And then just dry fit that again. That's better. Perfect. Very, very happy with that indeed. So all that is left for us in this build then is just to show you how I go about the basing. So what I have got is I have got 2 tubs here, enough basing materials to keep, well, all of my armies going probably forever. So this is a slightly coarser grit, and then we've just got a plain sand. I think literally that was actually scooped out of a pile of sand that our builders were using when they were doing some work to our house last year. So it's just perfectly ordinary sand, nothing special to it. You don't need to buy it from a model shop in a tiny little pot. You can certainly get it for a similar sort of price and a lot more, and probably free from elsewhere. The only thing that I would suggest that you do is leave it out in the sun to dry out, just to make sure that any moisture that's in there when it comes from the builder's yard or out the bag is gone. I mean, it will dry out over time anyway, but what you don't want is for that to be moist when it goes on. So what I'm going to do here, I do this in 2 stages. First is get some glue on and put in some of the coarser grit, then I fill in the rest of the glue and put on the fine grit. So all I'm going to do here is dab this in, and I'm going to look to dab it with the coarser stuff and just mix that in with the plastic on the base, the base piece that's come with it. Sort of bring that out into a natural shape. Just going to use my skewer to make sure that we get that right into the back there. And then we are just going to dip it in the coarse grit, make sure it's covered. Press it down. This is where having a tub like this is extremely handy, because you can just completely cover it. Press it down, knock off this excess, and you can see we have some chunkier pieces of grit around there, and then we're going to fill in the rest of that with the glue. We're going to repeat that process with some finer sand. So I'm just going to make sure this is all pressed down, and this is why I use the super glue, because I can shovel it about a bit, but what I know is that in 2 minutes time this is all going to be set. I can just crack on and prime the model, and I don't need to worry about leaving it overnight for PVA to sort itself out. We're just going to be ready to go. Now there are some tiny little gaps around the back there in the plastic, so what I might do is just do those separately once I've done this. So same process, dip it into the sand, just press the sand down, take them out, knock the excess off, Now, what you can sometimes get when you're doing this, particularly with sand, is what we've got here just around his feet, and that's where something like this comes in really handy, because you can just remove all of that. Don't need to worry about that hole, that will fill in when we come to prime it, or we could just shuffle some of this stuff and press it in. There we go. Just a bit more into the back there. And then let's just sort this bit out. This bit around the back. Now, you probably could leave this, but I can sometimes be a bit of a perfectionist, and that lip off the plastic piece is irritating me. So I'm just going to make sure I put plenty of glue all around there. I mean, the beauty of basing like this is that that piece of machinery that he's standing on has clearly been buried in whatever remnants of building are left in the area. So the idea that that is somehow sort of buried in the dust and the rubble suits my narrative quite nicely, and I don't have to worry about the idea that it's sort of partially buried, what have you. So there we go, just a bit of clean up around the edge there, and what we'll find when that is sprayed up is that that will look like sort of chunkier pieces of rubble around where this has fallen, and then smoother, finer grade rubbish around everywhere else. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. Do give me a like and subscribe if you did. I'm now going to move on to building an ATV. So I'll see you in that one. Bye for now.